Hey, it's Christina Tonneveld, also known as the Recovering Traditionalist. I had posted a blog post this week all about developing fact fluency, and then I said I would get on here live and answer some questions about it. So I had a couple people post some questions, so I'm going to do those first. But I also wanted to let you know that it is Saturday. All four of my kids are here. But luckily I've got my husband outside playing with them, so hopefully we don't get interrupted. But I also told them that I would keep this short. So hopefully going to be on here for about 15 minutes. But if you have any comments or questions while I'm doing this, feel free to type them into the chat area. So one of the first questions that I got was how to help kids who have learning difficulties. And I'll be completely honest, that is not my area of expertise. So there's probably someone who has a much better answer than what I'm about to give. But from what I have found, and there's probably specific things that you need to do for specific learning difficulties. But in general, what I have found is that the kids who really struggle with facts, the piece that they're most missing is that spatial relationship. So in the blog post, we talked about 4 number relationships that make up kind of number sense. The first one was spatial relationships, and that is having a visual picture. And then the second one is 1, 2, more, and less. The third one is understanding those benchmarks of 5 and 10. And then the fourth one is understanding part, whole, that when you have a whole, it can be broken into parts, and that parts come together to make a whole. Now, all of them are super important, but if kids don't have a visual picture of a quantity, of a number, all that other stuff becomes so much more difficult. Because let's think about this. If all you have I'm trying to find a piece of paper here quickly. If all you think about with the number 7 is this, the digit 7, that becomes really hard to think about what's one more than that and what's one less than that. How does that number relate to the benchmarks of 5 and 10? And how do I take this thing and break it apart into pieces? But when you have a visual picture, a spatial relationship of 7, and then you also have a visual picture of what 8 looks like, it's a whole lot easier to understand that 8 is one more than 7. I can see it. There is one more thing. And so unfortunately for a lot of our kids, this is their only image of what 7 is. And that becomes really difficult to build any kind of number sense about numbers if that's the only visual that you have. So I am a really big proponent of doing tons of visual activities with young learners. So doing things with 10 frames and the math rack are 2 of my favorite things to use. But any kind, the first place I ever learned about it was from that book back there, Teaching Student-Centered Mathematics. And they just recommended the very first version, that's the new version. The very first version that I ever had recommended just taking paper plates and little circle stickers and making dot patterns for kids so that they see 7 dots instead of just a digit 7. So we really want to build a visual image for kids. And I once heard Marcy Cook at a conference talk about this and relating it to reading. Now I gotta say, I've never been a reading teacher. My whole career has been focused in elementary and middle school mathematics. So, but it really hit home when I heard her say this. So this is not from me, this is from Marcy Cook. But she talked about in reading, a really good sign of a reader is being able to create a visual image of what's happening in the story. And we don't do that in mathematics. And she talked about, if you close your eyes and you ask a kid to picture cat, we don't expect them to picture C-A-T. We want them to actually picture cat. But in mathematics, when we say close your eyes and picture 8, most of us, the only thing we picture is the numeral 8. So I feel like those kids who have those learning difficulties around mathematics is because they don't have a visual image of numbers. All that they have is that abstract symbol, and those abstract symbols really aren't what make the math. It's just a notation symbol. So we really want kids to understand the quantity, and that digit is a representation of a quantity, of an amount. And then once they do that, then they can build all those others of 1 and 2 more or less, the benchmarks of 5 and 10, and part, whole becomes so much easier when they have that first spatial relationship built. Now, another question that I got was, so what's wrong with counting on fingers? I'm an adult, I still count on my fingers, right? And we do. At times, it's a great way to double check some things. But when we are talking fluent, if we want kids to be fluent, counting on fingers is not fluent. I was kind of trained through CGI, cognitively guided instruction, and there's a whole trajectory of strategies that kids go through from direct modeling. So if they're doing 3 plus 4, it's 1, 2, 3. And then they'll do 1, 2, 3, 4, and then they'll have to come back and go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. That's direct modeling. The next phase, so they're using, they have to model all of it. The next phase is when a kid is able to hold an amount in their head and then count on. So they'll hold the 3 and then they'll go 4, 5, 6, 7. Right? So those strategies they're usually using their fingers. They could use manipulatives for that as well, but they need something to keep track of. Those two beginning strategies are strategies, but they are not fluent strategies. They provide an accurate answer most of the time for kids, but often they aren't very efficient, and those kids definitely are not flexible. And if you read my blog post, that is that missing ingredient. They need to be flexible in how they think about numbers. So those two strategies are strategies, but they're not fluent strategies. To be truly fluent, we want kids in the two upper strategy, or they're not strategies, but the upper two pieces of the progression. And the very end of the progression is knowing your fact. So if it's 3 plus 4, I just know it's 7. But the piece in between is also being fluent, and it's really building that flexibility, is when kids can say, 3 plus 4 is just like 3 plus 3, but it's one more. I hear footsteps. There's some of my kids. I knew they would interrupt us in some way. That's the joys of having 4 kids. So we want kids to be those flexible thinkers where they have some alternatives that if they don't just instantly know it, their backup strategy is not counting on their fingers, because counting on their fingers does get in the way of them being able to think about higher level mathematics. And it just takes longer, right? It's taking up too much of their working capacity to be able to focus on the things that we really want them to focus on. So we want kids in those upper two areas of that, being able to use something that they know, like 3 plus 3, to figure out something they don't know, is called derived facts. And then that final stage is just knowing the facts. And again, that progression comes from CGI, the Cognitively Guided Instruction Group, Thomas Carpenter and his whole team. So like I said, I truly want to strive for kids to be up in those upper ends, and the pieces that make that come from building their number sense of the spatial relationships, 1, 2 more or less, the benchmarks of 5 and 10, and part, whole. The more that those things get developed in students, the strategies come from it. If you have ever tried to like teach kids, let's practice our doubles, and every textbook that I have seen has a lesson on doubles and doubles plus 1 and doubles minus 1, and then later on the kids never use it. And it's because they don't have the number sense. They have not built the sense to make sense of that strategy you've been teaching them. So I tell people all the time that number sense can't be taught. It has to be caught. The kids need to have experiences that build this number sense, and they have to make sense of it for themselves. You cannot directly teach them number sense, and you cannot directly teach them strategies. If they don't personally understand that 4 is 1 more than 3, they will never use the doubles facts for 3 plus 4. They just won't. They have to have those number sense ideas built before they'll use those strategies. So focus on building kids' number sense through experiences, and then those strategies will come from it. I once saw, I think my old Boss, I think is where I learned that from, at BSU would say all the time that fluency is the byproduct of flexibility. So if you focus on building your kids' flexibility, fluency will come from it. They will become more accurate, they will become more efficient. But if you're trying to focus on getting kids efficient and accurate, they don't build their flexibility. So focus on their flexibility, and then the other pieces will come from that. So to help you guys with that, on my blog post, and I think I posted a link in the description of this video, but in the blog post there's a spot that talks about this, but also a link to be able to get an ebook that I created all about more about those 4 number relationships, more in depth, and it also includes assessments for those 4. And they're not like sit down the kids do stuff. It is you're doing it in a small group. Maybe you've got 3 or 4 kiddos, and you're showing them dot pattern cards, and you're just taking notes of, were they counting one by one? Did they see some groupings? That kind of stuff. So you have to be there to really learn where those kids are around their number sense. So there's a link to the blog, but then in the description of this video, there's also a direct link to request that ebook to get more information about the 4 number sense relationships and the assessments for that. And so that's pretty much it for today. I kept it under 15 minutes, so thank you guys for watching. And I hope that, go into the comments of the blog. If you have any other questions, put them into the comments there. And next week I have part 3 of the blog series that's going to be all about using subbotizing to implement these 4 ideas into your classroom. So have a great Saturday, and thanks for joining me.